the GMTK Game Jam for 2020.
A month ago, while scrolling through my recommended on YouTube, I decided to watch a GMTK Game Jam entry. This was a mistake, because I quickly became addicted to watching game dev videos. A week later, I finally gave in, and I decided to try my hand at indie game dev. I'm a computer science major, and I play video games a lot, so I thought this couldn't be too hard. I could probably make a game in 1 or 2 days. I've made games before using Pygame to implement simple graphics in Python, but I wanted to make a proper game, so I knew I would need a proper game engine. I ended up choosing to use Godot, Godot. Well, apparently no one knows how it's pronounced for sure, but I'll stick to the general consensus of Godot. I chose Godot because it's both free and open source, and being a college student, free is just about all my budget can handle. I was also interested in Godot because it had its own coding language, GDScript, a high-level programming language similar to Python. I looked through the detailed documentation online and saw this as a good opportunity to learn a new programming language. Now that I have a game engine, now all I need is a game. Shoot, I forgot about that part. I spent about an hour thinking about a game idea, and I ended up with this. An endless 2D platformer where you play as a cannon and move by your shooting knockback. I thought that this was an interesting idea because you would move with the same action you would use to attack. After researching how endless runners worked, I came up with this as a rough draft. Just the basics of the player character, enemies, and levels that spawn and despawn when the player passes those points. Not the greatest, but I thought it was enough to start. Now with a vision and a bit of time learning about scenes and scripts in Godot, I was able to make this. I added a joystick to control the direction that the player is looking and implemented shooting. I also added a basic HUD that displays the player's health, experience, and level. The HUD also contained a pause button that brings up a settings menu and pauses game processes. The menu was done by setting the visibility value on different screen nodes on button clicks. I later updated the HUD to display player stats and added a level up screen. Upgrading a stat in the level up screen buffs the player depending on what stat they choose. I played around with leveling to balance out each stat and ended up just messing around for a bit. Now that I had a leveling system, I needed a way to gain experience, so I added a triangle that moves towards you at a constant speed and deals damage to you when it hits you. Since we take damage now, I needed to add a death screen. So I added a death screen that displays your high score, a button that gives you the option to continue by watching an ad, and a button to give up and start from the beginning. I wanted to make more enemies, so I used a graphing calculator to figure out how to manipulate a sine wave's frequency and amplitude. I duplicated my original enemy, added new sprites and hitboxes to each, and made an enemy that travels to the player at an arc, dashes towards the player, moves towards the player in a wave, and the last one dashing side to side in a wave towards the player. Oh, that's not right. Let's add some angular dampening. And yep, that seems like it works. After that 2-day session of learning Godot and making a basic game, I ended up taking a break for about a week. I continued to watch more game dev videos throughout my break week, and the first thing I decided to work on when I came back were tile maps, in order to make level designing easier. I drew out my tile map and added each tile's collision. I remade the maps using the tile map I created and zoomed out the camera to make sure that the levels were spawning and despawning properly. I fidgeted around with the world environment node and was able to give sprites a neon effect, which I thought would be a great theme style for the game. The world environment node was great because through this one node I was able to change each sprite's glow to how I wanted. I then added some random generation to make the game not so bland. I decided to go with spawning a sequence of 1 to 3 safe spaces, then a danger space that had enemies. After compiling the game, it now looked like this. I changed the help screen to clearly display the actions the user can take, and I reworked the initial 2 levels to be a better tutorial for a new player. Now with random generating levels, the Endless Runner felt a lot smoother when moving forward. At this point, I felt my game was in a good spot to move to my iPhone. Plus, I was tired of playing a game that is supposed to be for mobile devices with a mouse. I set up my Mac Mini, exported to iOS, and installed the game on my phone through Xcode. And this was my finished product. A project that I thought would take about 2 days ended up taking 2 weeks, but honestly, it was a lot of fun and a great learning experience. I highly recommend anyone who has even the slightest interest in game dev to give it a try. I came into this with almost no knowledge, but there are so many great tutorials and good documentation online that basically anyone could do it.